So please join me in welcoming our director, Eva Lewis. And community organizers, Carlota Ray and Jackson Ray. As well as Jamie Webb, who is a bioethics student here at NYU, who will be moderating the discussion. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. I was wondering if you wanted to say a few more words, just introducing yourself, your involvement with the film, and obviously your role in the community as well.
Hi. Does it work?
I think so.
Okay. Hi. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm Eva. I live in Arivaca, but I'm originally from here. I grew up in the Northeast, and I've lived in Arivaca for about 6 years. And I started going out there and making short videos because I met really inspiring, wonderful people, and that sort of grew into Undeterred, and I'm really, really happy to be here and be able to bring it back to New York and show it here. And I know a lot of people in the audience, and thank you all so much for being here. It's really special.
My name is Carlota Ray. I live in Arivaca over 30 years, almost 40. I immigrated to Arizona in 1980, and I've been there for many years. It's a beautiful community. You should come visit. Sometimes I said, I don't care how ugly this gets, I'm not going anywhere else in the whole world. So.
Jackson Ray, this is my mama, and so I grew up in Arivaca. I just support People Helping People, which is the grassroots organization that was illustrated in the film in whatever way I am able.
Thank you very much. We'll make sure there's some time at the end for you folks to ask some questions of our panelists. There's so much I wanted to take from that film in terms of the monitoring and the violence perpetrated by Border Patrol agents and the experiences of the people crossing the border with prevention through deterrence and the use of the desert as a weapon. It's been covered quite prominently in some of the recent press. There's an article from the New York Times there about the experiences of people crossing the border. But I was wondering if, beyond what we've obviously heard from in the film, if you could talk a bit about your personal experiences of living in that kind of situation, in those communities that you find yourself in.
Well, like I said, I've been in Arivaca for many, many years. When my kids were little, they were born and they grew up there. And they used to go to school walking and, just the dirt road to the bus stop. And everything was quiet and beautiful, perfect. For little kids and everybody going to school and going to work and everything. And it was really nice and peaceful. But then later, after, I don't know, maybe 2008 is when things started to change. And I couldn't even send my kids walking to school anymore. We started to drive around our yards fast, and I'll never forget, they ran over our favorite dog. So if they can run over my dog, then I was afraid they will run over my kids. So then I started changing things, taking in my car. So anyways, that's a change for me, because if they used to walk to the bus stop and then later they couldn't even do that, I had to be more responsible sending the kids to the bus stop. But over the years, like I said, it was beautiful and peaceful, but then we got caught in the middle of the situation with all this political situation after 9/11. I believe that's when the wall was built. It's a really ugly scar in the ground already. And then there was checkpoints around us, they question us all the time when we go to school, go shopping, go to the doctor. We have to roll our windows down and see these edges in the side. And if my skin is brown, I love my color of skin. I won't change my color of skin. But because of that reason, I get questioned more than other people. If you're white, you have blue eyes, they wave at you, they smile at you, but if it's me, they might pull me to secondary. So I don't want a nice checkpoint. I want no checkpoint at all. Also because checkpoints are killing people. Immigrants, refugees, they have to walk so much farther. So the wall, the checkpoints are killing people today. So.
Yeah, the town, it's really tiny. Like there are no street lights, so it's very much dependent on larger cities right outside of it. So it's been a massive shift in its occupation, and the film does a really good job in talking about that occupation and kind of illustrating the difference between the border itself, which, you know, we would cross so often to go visit my grandmother in Sasava, Sonora. So that compared to the border zone and how north that extends, it really kind of sets the physical space for this occupation. And, you know, growing up in the town where you knew every single person, and if it was like a new person, all you had to do was ask one other individual, and they would tell you like, oh, that's that person's family who's visiting. It definitely has drastically changed the feel of the community itself, because it is so small and really intimate. So that occupation is definitely it's true in saying it's occupied.
I think, like we were talking earlier today about how when you're like here, it's such a different, it feels like a different reality. Like the landscape there is just so much bigger. Like everything in the Southwest, there's so much more land, and just spatially, like I don't think people realize what a vast expanse of desert it is and what it really means for people to be walking. For I think Sophie in the film says like that she's encountered people, like I've encountered people who've been walking 20 days in the desert without food. You know, I used to work at the fire station in Arivaca, and Border Patrol uses tactics like we would get calls, 911 calls, because Border Patrol had chased a group of people off a cliff. And, you know, they use tactics where they will fly their helicopters really low and scatter people. And even in the time that I've lived there, and I've lived there a lot less time, I've only lived there 6 years, but I've seen a dramatic escalation happen in just the level of enforcement. And prevention through deterrence it's not just the walls, which were built in the 90s, which pushed people out into the desert, but then you have the checkpoints, which push people further, and then you have all around Arivaca, you have these surveillance towers, which means, you know, if there's a surveillance tower by Carlota's house, that means that people are deterred from going to that house to seek assistance. So it's like this ongoing, continuous pushing of people into more and more remote areas. And we have a neighbor who just a couple weeks ago was walking her dog, and the dog smelled something off the side of the path, went off the path, and found a dead body sitting there. And that's the type of thing, you know, our friends in Ajo, they'll go on a hike and they'll find 10 human remains in a single area. That's the Ajo part of the desert that you saw in the film is the deadliest corridor in the U.S.-Mexico border, and you have people dying. I mean, we have no idea the scope of death in that area. A lot of the land is very inaccessible. It's such a vast expanse of land, and so people who do go and walk in sort of these wildlife refuge and areas will find literally, I mean, dozens of remains in a single day, and there's no count of those bodies. So it's not just a crisis of death, it's a crisis of disappearance, because those people are never found, and if they are found, are not identified often.
Yeah, we have a map on the screen now showing the area the red dots representing deaths in that area.
And can I just say something about this map, which is that each red dot on this map that you see is not just a single human remain necessarily. It's a site where human remains were found, so some of the dots represent more than one person, and these are just the recovered remains. So there are many, many remains that, again, have yet to be recovered.
Carlotta, you mentioned about how it's changed for different generations, the experiences of living in the area, how the things that you would have let your children do before, you wouldn't let them do now with the increased militarization. Do you think it's affecting the psyche of the children growing up in this area now who won't have known what their communities were like without this border presence?
Yes, especially because I have a very young grandson, and he usually likes to hike and ride his bike and run around the property, and I worry about him because he thinks he's safe and he's okay, he just does what the young kid will do. And by the way, the property is for my grandkids to run around and ride their bikes or play with rocks or whatever, But sometimes Border Patrol is running around in my backyard too, and they have guns. So I don't like that. So if we're talking about they are in our backyards, they are in our roads, they're everywhere. It's upsetting to see that. I usually close my gate and lock my gate so they don't come through. But even if they want to go through, they just open a big wide hole in the fence and go run in the backyard anyways, because they do whatever they want. So it's very upsetting to see that, because I believe we pay thousands and thousands and tax money to live in those properties, and Police Border Patrol is running around in my property and I can't tell them to get out. I will if I see him, but sometimes I don't see him. So anyways, it's very upsetting to be in that situation, and sometimes can't do anything about it or not much about it. But if I see him in person, I will tell him, no, you can't go in my property, it's private property. So, but sometimes I don't. So it's been very upsetting what I'm seeing lately. I mean, it is a bad feeling to know that we're watched with the towers, with all the technology that's around. It's a bad feeling. It feels like always somebody's watching after you, doing whatever move you do. So
yeah, and there was some footage of a bus passing through the checkpoint, and the school children from Arivaca have to cross that checkpoint every day to school. It's the school's that far.
yes, yeah, and that's the thing. This is not normal. The kids thinking that it's normal to go to school and to see this armed agents on the school bus every day, every morning, every time they go through there. I don't like that. I don't want my grandkid to think it's okay to go through that and get used to. This is normal, because it's not. No, it's no sense.
And no, I think that's true. It's totally normalized, and I think one thing we've been talking about with Julie and with you all who are developing the curriculum based on the film is that the psychological violence, I think, of living in such a militarized zone, and also like how to relate that to, because I think one thing that I always say is like the border is the canary in the coal mine. Like they take technologies, they take companies that are profiting off of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, they bring them to the border, they test them out on border communities, and then they bring them to the rest of the country. And you see really militarized neighborhoods here in New York. There are kids who, are dealing with the NYPD. Like, I think, just to bring it back around, like that level of normalization of militarization of daily life is like psychological violence, because when you go through a checkpoint, even if they just wave you through, there's that threat. That's a person with a huge assault rifle who has power over you, and there's no transparency, there's no accountability, and like you don't in that situation, like I think have like even if you're not gonna stand like you're the evaluating of like am I gonna stand on my rights or is it not worth the struggle, and just like the psychological violence of having to like even if it's not a physical violence or like an explicit threat of having to make that evaluation every time you're just going about your business, I think is a type of violence.
And given those difficulties, what keeps you going from the day to day with those challenges that you face every day?
I think this is necessary. Somebody needs to respond to this need. And I have learned that humanitarian aid is not a crime, and I'm there to assist the ones that have a need. I'm there to respond because I choose to respond. I can always turn away that and pretend that I don't see anything, or live in my comfort zone in my house and watch movies or whatever, not get involved in anything and ignore the whole thing. Because a lot of people said, it's really not a thing that you can do about this situation. Of course, we all can do something about the situation, but it's up to each one of us as a person, as a human being. Like I said, I feel like it's my responsibility as a citizen, as a resident in that community, to respond to this need. And I usually just help. It doesn't matter who it is, because that person has dignity, respect, has the right to live. And if I can give him a hand, I'm going to do that in that community. It doesn't matter who it is, any person, anybody. I'm there to help.
I think one thing that is critical is the organizing effort that happens with folks who have like the access to information and knowledge. So like the workshops that happened at the community center, I think there was some footage there. I learned a lot about what rights I had and how the assumptions that I was making were very much driven out of like fear and like the police state and what I can and cannot do as an individual. And I'm somebody who was born here in this country, but I still get like my heart beats so fast when I'm crossing the checkpoint. So really like creating space for folks in the community and really like providing folks a platform to like ask questions and get information is to me so motivating. Like having a lawyer with Ramos Mortes come in and really talk about the specifics, and for that to feel as though I'm protected and I'm able to do the things that instinctually are where my mind goes in like helping somebody. The first thing is the want to help, but there's a quick overriding factor that's like, oh, you can't do that because you're going to get in trouble, and it's somehow against the law. When in actuality, that's really not the case. But that's what we're fighting against so often, and that's just like the ideology that's like embedded in like the system and everything. So really countering that and having open forums to educate ourselves, I think, is really critical in addressing the need, because individuals are still going to cross the need. It's infathomable and it's varied.
And just to clarify, we say humanitarian aid is never a crime, and I think that in terms of moral law, that is absolutely true, and we all know that that's true. In terms of U.S. law, which often breaks international law, it is currently being criminalized. So I don't know if everyone in the room has heard of the cases that are going on against humanitarian aid workers, but Scott Warren, who is in the film talking about the community in Aho, is currently facing felony charges and up to 25 years in prison for providing literally the criminal complaint against him. If you read it, it says he was providing food, water, and medical care for 3 days to 2 individuals from Central America. And there is also 9 volunteers with No More Deaths who are facing misdemeanor charges for leaving water in a protected wildlife refuge, which, if you've been reading the news and you read about how Donald Trump wants to build this wall now in Texas and they're breaking ground in a butterfly sanctuary, the irony of like that it should be more important not to litter on a wildlife refuge because the government cares so much about protecting the environment. So 4 of those individuals who are being charged with that crime were just recently convicted and found guilty and are facing 6 months in jail for leaving water on this wildlife refuge. And that is, again, the area that's the deadliest corridor of the U.S.-Mexico border, where dozens of remains are being found all the time. And I think, there is a campaign. We're asking everyone to sign No More Deaths. If you Google No More Deaths and go to their website, there's a support statement that they're asking as many people, share it around to sign. And, to keep an eye on that, because really it's sort of like what is at stake is this moral truth, which is that it should not be illegal to help people, but it's part of the dehumanization. And I think your question was, what gives us hope? To me, it's like we were in court last week or a week and a half ago for the case of the Cabeza defendants who were found guilty for leaving water. And we sat and we listened to the wildlife refuge manager on the stand, and the defense attorney asked him, are you aware that migrants are dying on the wildlife refuge that you are in charge of? And he was like, I'm aware that illegal border crossers are dying. And it was so, I feel like, illuminating, because it's really like the level of dehumanization that people involved in enforcing these policies have to project onto people who are crossing the border is so high. And I think what is amazing to me about the organizing in Arivaca is the countering of that, because we are such a community, and our group, People Helping People, is not just an organizing group, it's like a support group. Like, we are there for each other, we support each other when hard things happen, we are able to talk about it with each other. And I think that in terms of what gives hope in these times, it's that sense of community, that sense of humanization, and building that and holding on to that, because when you're facing people who have lost their humanity by taking it away from other people, I think that that's what you need to hold on to, and I think that's what inspires me. So, yeah.
I think that's a really nice opportunity to perhaps invite some questions and comments from people, folks in the audience. So if anyone has anything they'd like to contribute and ask our panelists, that'd be fantastic. I think we've got a question from the gentleman just back there in the... Oh, fantastic. Would you mind coming to the front, sir? Is that okay to ask you? Oh.
I think there are a great many ways in which you could counter this rise to a fascist state, which is this country becoming. 13th Amendment to the Constitution about involuntary servitude seems to be getting more support, or at least less of the concern that one would hope they would have. I would like to just suggest that as social media has been so effective in so many ways, one of the ways in which people could become more and more aware of what's going on is by having a network of people who will, through Facebook and the other organizations, try to viral some of these issues, because a lot of Americans don't not only want to hear it, but they don't hear what's going on. And until the kind of massive awareness that occurred during the Occupy period, and I don't know why it stopped, I think we have a lot of positive weapons that can be used, especially people in very knowledgeable media, to flood the American consciousness of what's happening.
Yeah,
Yes, question. Thank you.
I want to thank you so much for this wonderful film. It's such a document that once you see it, you can't say you don't know, because you know everything there is to know and about what needs to be done. And I just wanted to ask you, because there were words that kept coming up, words like checkpoint and occupation, the need for monitoring, and it kept reminding me of Palestine. And I just wondered whether you might comment on whether you feel there are parallels there.
Yes. So yeah, that's a really good question. There are parallels, more than just parallels, there's concrete companies that are the same. So the surveillance towers that you saw in the film that are all around Arivaca and throughout the Arizona borderlands, they were originally built by Boeing Corporation, which is based in Seattle. And they were a multi-million-dollar contract with the Department of Homeland Security that was dubbed a failure because they would be set off by like the rain and cows and stuff. But they were supposed to be creating like a virtual interior wall, much like the checkpoints. And so since that project was dubbed a failure, they decided to redo the project, the exact same project, with an Israeli military contractor called Elbit Systems. So now you have 53 new towers that are going up. Some of them are going up on the Tohono O'odham Reservation, on sacred sites, on burial grounds that are sacred. And there's, our Border Communities Coalition is trying to fight against these towers, but they've already started building them in Arivaca. They put them up like overnight. The community was given no warning. And so that's an Israeli company. In Tucson, the university in Tucson, the U of A, has a tech park, which is like an area on the side of the edge of town where they have a base for all of these companies, and a lot of them are Israeli military contractors that are coming and setting up headquarters in Tucson, Arizona, to bring a lot of the technologies that they're testing out in Palestine to the U.S.-Mexico border. And I think some of the companies that they looked at to contract to build the new wall that Donald Trump wants to build are also Israeli. So there are a lot of parallels, actually, just in terms of concrete. Anywhere that there's military occupation, people are profiting off of that. And that's certainly true on the border, and it's certainly true in occupied Palestine as well. So, yeah.
Thanks so much, Eva. Any more questions for our panel?
I also want to thank you all for just being here and like this gentleman said, raising our consciousness, because sometimes I really think that many Americans are just asleep and just think that this will never happen to me. Yet and well, and it was written up in the New York Times that some of the citizens in the border towns, their passports are not being renewed because some of the midwives, they were birthed at home and they don't believe that their documents and the birth certificates are real. So they're not even renewing their passports when they apply or reapply for their passports. So these are some of the issues that we are facing now. We have a president who says that the threats are at the border when his own intelligence agencies are saying, no, the threats are not at the border. He doesn't even mention the border. He's mentioning the intelligence community is saying, we've got bigger problems. And here they are. But he's like, no, they're naive. And these are people who are paid experts to take care of this. So, I think your film is so powerful. I agree with this gentleman very much so that you just need to, I don't know how you put a film like this out there. Maybe people just don't want to see it, don't want to face it. But I really want to thank you all for being here. I think you are just so very brave. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. you. The gentleman with the microphone.
Yeah. I'd also like to thank you guys for making a really great film. And I really do believe that Arivaca really is the canary in the coal mine. Because I think that we're seeing this kind of interior enforcement going on all around the country now. I don't know if people are aware, but the New York State courts are allowing Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, to come into the courts and to check people's identification and to detain them and deport them if they find people in there who they're looking for. So actually there's going to be a demonstration next Wednesday at 4:30. People are going to be gathering. A bunch of community groups are coming together to do a demonstration at the Office of Court Administration on Beaver Street. We're gathering at the Bull down at the foot of Wall Street at 4:30 next Wednesday. So if you can come, please, it'd be great. Great to see you. Thanks. And thank you, really.
Thank you for this incredible film, and thank you all for coming to talk to us. I wanted to ask something that really jumps out at you in the film is the way that this has. It seems like what's happening in Arivaca has really politicized the community. It doesn't seem like it's an entire town of people who were all activists before this happened, but that largely like what's happening in people's homes, backyards, community is like. Has politicized people and has made people really strong and like fearless activists. And so I would just be interested in hearing all of you talk a little more about that. And then also, maybe this is a positive way of thinking about Arivaca as a canary in the coal mine. It's like, is there potential for that in other places too? Like, is that possibly also a model for thinking about how people sort of get activated in this moment?
Can I say something? I have to say this. Part of this film is so hard for me to watch. I can't do it. I did the first time I did because I felt like I had to. But at the end, I couldn't stop crying for almost 30 minutes. And I still feel the same way because this is happening in my community. This is happening to us, the residents in this community, and a lot of the other fronteras. And it's hard. It's hard to live this way 24/7 all year round. It's okay. Like I said, I'm not going anywhere. I like to do what I do. It's important for me to be there and respond. But I said this before, I don't remember to who. I want to share the pain. Because if I keep the pain, it's too hard for me to just hold it and keep my stories, that I have so many stories, I can write books about mis hermanos, hermanas, inmigrantes, refugees. They're coming over the years, and it's just a few of the stories that I have experienced, and those are very difficult to handle it. It's hard because you're human and you care for other people when they're laying down and they might die right now or later. So for me, it's just sharing the pain that I live in this community all these years, but I'm still willing to be there for anyone that comes to my door or on my backyard or in my streets and my community. I just want to share this with other people. I know you have a caring heart, and I just want other people to use it, especially young people today. Not because he's here, but like my son, he has a wonderful caring heart. And I just want somebody else to do something about this situation. How can you support us? What can you do about this situation? Because to me, this is my community. I love my community and I have to protect my community because it's where he was born, it's where he was raised, it's where we live. This is our place that we love. But then we got caught in the middle of all this militarization that came and just pretty much they're around us all the time. And they put this fear on us. And like we say, we are at risk for giving humanitarian aid to anyone that comes in danger of losing their life and their way to, I don't know where they're going, I don't know who they are, I don't know where they're coming from, but they're humans just like you and me. And they have the right to live, to survive. It doesn't matter who that person is to me.
Yeah, I do think that it definitely has politicized folks, maybe who didn't really see themselves as an organizer or an activist, because the town is so small, and with throughout the years of prevention through deterrence, how deadly that's made crossing become. It's really, I think, set folks into action because they're seeing this play out like on a daily basis in the back of on their properties, right? Like in the town itself. And then again, anytime that you leave the town, you're gonna come across agents. You're gonna see multiple cross you while you're driving down the road. And so again, like the education piece, I think has really allowed folks to mobilize and kind of talk through the challenge, which is a whole nother skill set. Like, what is it to heal during a time of distress or feeling powerless? I think it's demanded those skills to be developed in order for the community to like remain intact, because it does feel like a military space.
I hope that it inspires other people. The story of Arivaca. I mean, I feel very inspired by the people who live in that community and do this work, and I want the film to bring that to other people. We've been touring it throughout other border communities, and we are going to continue to do that. My goal, I don't know if we're going to get to do this, but I want to bring it to every community that's south of a checkpoint. So far the discussions in other border communities have been really, really interesting and cool, and I think border communities are so fascinating. But, I think everybody everywhere in this country right now can be involved in that sort of direct support. There is such a need for people who are able to sponsor asylum seekers, people who are able to do detention support. We were just told about what's happening here in the courts with ICE. I mean, I think that there is community organizing around these issues on every level to shut down, Urban Shield, which is the conference where these military technologies get sold to local police departments like the NYPD. I mean, there's organizing that needs to happen around that. So I think, there's already amazing organizing happening on many levels in many different places throughout this country. And I think what we need is a unified movement. And we need a unified movement not just for real, actual immigration reform, but for real, actual immigration reform that doesn't come at the cost of further militarization of the border. Because every single time that there has been DACA or DAPA, it always comes with a price tag, a multi-million-dollar price tag for further militarization of the border to fund all of this that you saw tonight in the film. And so my hope is that we need not just abolish ICE, but abolish Border Patrol, I think, and, to retract, or to really unify the movements that are happening throughout the country. So I hope that the film can be seen and can be inspirational in that sense. I think that was part of the question. I forgot that.
Okay, I think we've got time for about 2 more brief questions for our panel. So if anyone has any more contributions, yes, Jen, on about 4 rows back.
Thank you for this opportunity, for making the movie, and for being up here. So to the entire panel, what do you think is the best way we can hold Border Patrol agents accountable to their crimes, and how can we change the way that they treat people at their checkpoints?
It's a good question because a few years ago, my mother was still alive. I have to share this with you. And I was the only one responsible for my mother because my father had passed away many years ago. And my mother was pretty sick in the hospital. They have said, there's nothing we can do about your mother. She has cirrhosis, liver, and so she has not much time left. So I'm the one that has citizenship. So I brought my mother to Tucson and put her in the hospital. And they're going through all this tests and all this stuff. And I feel so responsible. I didn't have an older brother or anyone else to go to ask, so what's going to happen? What are we going to do? My mother is only here for 90 days. This is what they agreed with me. And now she's pretty much dying, and what am I supposed to do? So I'm driving to Tucson. Before I got to the checkpoint, I'm so overwhelmed. I'm crying, literally crying, tears in my eyes, running down my cheeks, all the way up. And then I said, when I was getting so close to the checkpoint, I said, oh, please, why did this place have to be here? I hope they don't ask me anything. I hope they don't say anything to me, because I was so just so overwhelmed with my mother's situation. So I got to the checkpoint, I rolled down the window, and of course, he's standing right there. I'm crying like a little girl, and he's asking, what is my citizenship status or something? I don't know what he said. And it took me like a couple of almost minutes to think, because I was so not here. And I feel so bad because why are they here? They need to get a real job. This is the last place I need to stop and answer this question. So again, like I said, I just don't want checkpoints around me to ask these stupid questions when I'm not thinking about it. Only I was thinking just about my mother, about my situation. But he was too worried asking me if I just crossed the desert yesterday. Anyways, it's just so upsetting. And you don't realize that because you don't have checkpoints around you. But we always face these checkpoints, and it's so hard. It's so difficult. I want them gone. I'm sorry.
So how do we get rid of them?
Good question.
On that question.
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, because that's kind of like, how can we address institutionalized racism and a lot of really deep, ingrained, problematic things. But I mean, just some of the things that come to mind are, documenting what those experiences are, reporting those, organizing together. I think the film did such an incredible job of illustrating resistance in motion. And as long as folks reach out and are open and honest and vulnerable, then there's always space for resistance. And unless there's resistance, like change is not going to come. So I think it's really just expanding on those around you and really kind of sitting together and talking about what those challenges are, whether it's Border Patrol or any other challenge that we're facing. Like, that resistance needs to come together as a group, and then it moves forward from there. But
one thing you can do is you can also support people helping people in the border zone. We have a website, phparivaca.org. We are always in need of financial support. We have t-shirts for sale outside. They're really cool. All the funds go to PHP. So that is one way that you can help. You can organize more screenings of the film. You can try to, have a speaker come and talk about what's going on the border. You can come visit us on the border. Get involved locally in things that are going on, like Jackson said. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think we have one more question. If anyone has a big hand at the back there, sir.
Hi. So again, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing your story and this excellent film. And thanks for being activists on the front line for such an important cause. I was curious about the relationship between Border Patrol and the activist organizations on the ground, and specifically through communication. So I'm wondering, do the organizations inform the Border Patrol or any law enforcement agencies of campaigns or just specific actions that will be taken? And then vice versa, do Border Patrol agencies inform organizations of things they might be bringing in, like helicopters or just more personnel and whatnot? Thank you.
Thanks so much.
No, they do not. My phone would be ringing off the hook if I got a call every time there was a helicopter or something. That is constant. It's constant. They're everywhere, and they don't care about the community, and they treat everybody in the community with suspicion and aggressively, pretty much. They're not trying to inform us of anything. Some of the bigger humanitarian aid organizations, like No More Deaths, certainly has been in dialogue with the government to try and, because No More Deaths and Derechos Humanos, both of whom were featured in the film, are two organizations that are based in Tucson that run actually a hotline for people who are looking for their missing family members in the desert. And they will get calls sometimes from people actively in the desert who are lost. And they will try, if I went missing in the desert, there is an organization called Sarah that will look for me. I mean, they have helicopters, they have drones, they have everything. They would go, I'm a US citizen. They would go, they have a 97% success rate of finding people when they are lost in the desert. When a 911 call comes in, and No More Deaths is actually in the process of releasing a really, really good abuse documentation report about this, but when a 911 call comes in from somebody who is crossing the desert without papers and is lost and is in distress, those calls do not get forwarded to Sarah, this search and rescue organization. They get forwarded to the Border Patrol, and Border Patrol does not respond. So organizations like No More Deaths and like Derechos Humanos do try in those situations to get Border Patrol agents to go out and help and look, because they have so much more resources, and we're talking about a huge expanse of land. And sometimes when it's somebody's life is on the line, even though, that person probably wouldn't want to be detained, they'd rather that than die in the desert, and Border Patrol will not go. So there have been meetings to try and pressure around those things. There were meetings with the land management agencies to try and get permission to leave water, for example, on the Cabeza Prieta National Wildlife Refuge. Those meetings are not super fruitful, especially currently with the current people that are in positions within the Border Patrol and the District Attorney and all the sort of different government agencies that are now under the Trump administration, the people who are in those positions. In terms of people helping people, I think we usually, when we have public actions, we make it pretty public. I think Border Patrol usually, they're not like surprised. I mean, we're like right in the middle of town. They see us all the time. But yeah.
One final thought. What I was really shocked to learn about as someone not even from outside the border zone, but kind of outside the country, that suggested there was another factor at play was the recent rise in the militias in that area, and perhaps the militias' relationships with the Border Patrol. I wonder if you could just briefly comment on that, perhaps before we wrap up.
I know, the militia are deeply stupid. They're wackadoos. They're horrible. They think, the border is porous and they have to come and protect it. And there are Border Patrol. I mean, officially, Border Patrol doesn't take a position to endorse the militia. But nobody who lives on the border is part of those groups. I mean, like, very few people, certainly not in Arivaca. It's people who are coming from Oregon, from, Idaho, like, because they think the border is porous and needs protecting, and they're, like, big macho guys who can, like, whatever. And so there are individual agents who collaborate with them, and certainly, the mentality is the same with a lot of the Border Patrol agents. I think there was a group, the Minutemen, who are no longer exist. Part of their sort of like collapse had to do with like internal stuff, had to do with the fact that in 2009 they were operating out of the Arivaca area and came and did a home invasion and killed a 9-year-old girl and her father in the community, and that organization sort of crumbled in the like sort of media fallout from that crime. But one of the people who was deeply involved in that Minutemen organization, when I went to try, some of the footage in the film is from the Border Security Expo, where all these private military contractors will come and like it's like an expo where they display their wares to Border Patrol. All the like military like guns and toys that Border Patrol can buy, and Department of Homeland Security. And me and a journalist friend of mine tried to get into that event, and we were thrown out. And then we heard from someone who did get in that this guy who had been deeply involved in the Minutemen organization was there rubbing elbows with all the top heads of Department of Homeland Security. So there are, people who are, there is that relationship, but officially they don't endorse the militia groups. But yeah, they are on the border being morons.
I just want to say one more thing about that. Is our community is going to do whatever we need to do to resist on those guys, because they're armed, they're heavy arms, they're dangerous. And the experience that we had with family, there was not only family in our community, but also were relatives. We used to go to church together, the kids used to play together, they used to go to school together. And one of the experiences that I will never forget is my granddaughter was so friends with that little girl. After this happened, she couldn't even go to bed in her own bedroom. She was just so afraid. She didn't understand what happened to her friend. Why did they shot her friend in the head? Why did this happen? And she was just too afraid to sleep in her own bedroom. And so maybe like a month later, she finally decided to go, and that only because she took her big Rottweiler with her. But that affect the community very, very much. And we don't want any of those guys around. They're also very dangerous for the immigrants and refugees that are coming through the desert, because like I said, they're very heavily armed and they are dangerous. We don't know what they'll do out there. So again, there's another thing, the last thing we need, but we have that situation too.
And I will say that so after this murder happened in Arivaca, the community was very active in pushing the militia groups out. And for years, there was no militia in the area at all. And then I think, especially since the rise of Donald Trump, it's been like a resurgence of these groups coming down, because the rhetoric really emboldens people with that mentality to come and think that what they're doing is so important and needed and all these things. So yeah, it's ugly.
Well, on that note. I would like to take this opportunity to again thank Carlotta, Jackson, and Eva for all the work they're doing in their community, and of course this magnificent film, for bringing this situation to the whole country for them to see, and for showing the whole country and us what really effective and fantastic organising and resistance can look like. So thank you again. Thank you so much for coming.